City of the Wolves from Fatal Fury, the latest entry in that SNK series, had its open beta over the last weekend, and I got to play at least a little bit. And so for this video, what I wanted to talk about is the beta and the game itself. I think it's fun to play. I enjoyed basically the art style. It passed the eyeball test. I'm really shallow when it comes to fighting games, so for me to even consider picking the controller, I have to vibe with how the game looks and feels, and I like the way the game looks and feels when you're in action. I like the art style. SNK completely lost me when they made the transition from KOF 13, which is one of the most beautiful sprite-based games of all time, one of the most beautiful games, period. And then when they went to KOF 14 and 15 with the 3D models, you know, they were learning the ropes and they just weren't there yet. With City of the Wolves, they went with like the cel-shaded comic book inspired art style. I'm a sucker for that. I think it looks beautiful. It's obviously not like super high fidelity, but art style matters so much more than fidelity in my opinion, and City of the Wolves manages to pull that off. And I like the pacing of the gameplay. Obviously, that hasn't been figured out entirely. And if you only watched my first stream, I was just mashing buttons. I didn't know how to play at all, but I did get to play at least a little bit off stream. If you want to learn about the gameplay of Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, I really enjoyed this video by Lord Knight. He goes over all the systems. He talks about his opinions on how the gameplay will develop in time. And I think this was a really good video. So if you want to think about the gameplay, I highly recommend watching this video or watch any of the other fighting game creators. There's tons of videos out there talking about the actual gameplay itself. But what I wanted to talk about is more of the product, the experience of the beta. Right away, once you get into the game, you're met with things like this, and you're met with the UI, and you're met with the tutorials, and you're met with a lot of things that really make me nostalgic. And I don't even know if nostalgia is the right word. What is the word for when you're reminded of bad times in the past? It was like negative nostalgia. I was taken straight back to like 2012, 2010 era fighting games where the menu is archaic and it just feels sluggish and out of date. The tutorials make no sense. Chris F had this post here about how like fundamental system mechanics, like the wake up system, was not covered in the tutorial. I had no idea about any of these wake up options until someone was randomly rolling on wake up, and I didn't understand that. There is an in-game tutorial in the beta, and maybe it's not the full thing that will be in the finished product, but what we've often seen with these types of betas is that the games end up looking exactly like the beta is, and the game releases 2 months from now. So it feels like that is likely the final tutorial, and it had all the classic issues that a lot of fighting game tutorials suffer from. For example, it talked about, I forget what the red parry mechanic is, but you're able to block moves, and if you're already in block stun, the next hit you can time a forward input to parry out of and cancel the block stun. And it gave an example, but it made me just perform that action one time. It didn't go into in-depth explanation that cancels block stun, so you should do another action to punish it. So it would throw like all these system mechanics at you. And in Fatal Fury, there's a lot of system mechanics. And I think this game will be good in that sense. I think this game does reward defense a lot more. It felt refreshing to play a game that had a bit of a slower neutral pace. There's no drive rush in this, for example. And I think there's going to be a lot of mechanics and a lot of depth to this game long term. But like, once again, the tutorial's not explaining that. And then as far as the actual experience itself, searching for these matches, the ranked searching, obviously it's beta, it could improve. It was pretty bad, right? I was always finding connections with like 200 ms. It was not very often giving me solid connections. The netcode itself, once I got into most matches, was usually fine. There were a handful of unplayable connections here and there, but the queue times were extremely long. It took a long time to find matches, and there were experiences like this. You can see Idom here talking or posting about one of the games that he had while playing City of the Wolves. So this was, your experience may vary, right?
Ain't no way this dude's on the moon. What the fuck? Ain't no way. I now block that. Yo, I see that move coming from the future.
So,
oh my god.
Yeah,
SNK,
your experience
please,
may
what the
vary.
fuck?
So occasionally the connections could go to shit like this. This never happened to me to this extreme, but I've had nearly as bad. And that's not to say that this never happens in other fighting game releases like Street Fighter 6, for example. That weird things can happen, right? And it's a beta, so they might iron that out. There was a lot of other issues aside from just the sometimes netcode issues. The queuing took way too long. In between rounds, it would fade to black for like what felt like 5 whole seconds. And I don't mean like, you know, I'm exaggerating here. I mean like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, so on and so forth. It felt like 5 seconds between rounds, which really hampers the experience of getting into the game, because I think the main thing about fighting games is you want to make it as frictionless as possible to get matches and keep playing matches. And I felt friction everywhere in this experience. There was friction booting up the game, navigating the menus, getting through the tutorials, queuing for matches, in between rounds, fighting games after completing a rank set. There was friction everywhere in the experience, and that is not actually how you want to go through a fighting game. And I think a lot of people were reiterating these sentiments. Here's James Chen. I hate to say it, but I would absolutely recommend SNK delay City of the Wolves for however long it takes to make the net play, netcode, and matchmaking work amazingly. In my opinion, if it releases with faulty netplay, it might make the game dead on arrival, and I don't mean a game with Mai as a guest character. I happen to agree with this take. I think that the online and matchmaking experience is the most important aspect of a fighting game, but developers have been putting that off. However, the wish for the delay, or the recommendation for delaying until you can get it right, is not going to happen. This game is releasing in 2 months, and I know it's a beta, and you can't completely judge the final product based on the beta experience, but generally speaking, we have seen with betas in the past that the beta is a good indication of how the game is going to release. And based on also SNK's track record with the KOF series, their net play has been subpar in all of those games. I think KOF 15 still has broken matchmaking as well. There's even like fan-made websites begging for SNK to fix the matchmaking. I don't think they've addressed it still, at least not to a sufficient degree. They have more incentive to not delay it, or they have obligations where they cannot delay the release, because City of the Wolves is going to be at the Esports World Cup. You know, SNK itself is also now has a lot of Saudi funding for the actual developers, on top of it being a title now at Esports World Cup. But they signed a 3-year partnership between the Esports World Cup Foundation and Fatal Fury developer SNK. That does not mean that for 3 years that City of the Wolves will be at Esports World Cup necessarily, but there's some kind of partnership with SNK, so maybe at some point there might be a new KOF coming to Esports World Cup. I don't know. But there's a partnership forming here, and City of the Wolves is slated to be at Esports World Cup 2025, which starts in July, 3 months after the scheduled, or potentially less than 3 months after the scheduled release for City of the Wolves. So there's no time to delay, because they already have obligations for this to be part of a multi-million-dollar circuit. I mean, the City of the Wolves itself might not have that much pricing, but we saw in the past, you know, how much pricing they put up. They've already announced the prize pools for chess, $1,500,000, Counter-Strike, $1.25 million, Street Fighter 6, you saw how much money they're throwing around for fighting games, and there's Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. It's slated to be a title in this tournament before it's been proven to be a functioning product. On top of that, it's also a main stage game at EVO, which is in August, 4 months after release, right? And here it is, sandwiched between Tekken 8 and Guilty Gear Strive. It actually overtook Guilty Gear Strive in the billing for the featured games at EVO Vegas. So they don't have time to delay the release. They have all these obligations, which goes to show that most likely the way the game is right now, how the game is going to be on release, there is a big chance that that is the case. That makes me think of one other game. That makes me think of Street Fighter 6. I think about how revolutionary Street Fighter 6 is to the fighting game genre, not for anything based on the gameplay itself. Street Fighter 6 has been extremely successful. Street Fighter 6 has sold 3 million copies in the first 7 months, and after a year, back in September, sold over 4 million copies. So it's outpacing Street Fighter 5 like crazy, and it's even outpacing games like Tekken 8. So Tekken 8, a year from release, sold 3 million copies, right? And traditionally, Tekken has outsold Street Fighter. So what has made Street Fighter 6 this successful? Is it because it's the god game? Is it because everyone loves dry rush and throw loops that much? I don't think so. I don't think this success of Street Fighter 6 is directly correlated with the gameplay. That is a part of it. That is a part of the recipe, of course. But the number one factor that sets Street Fighter 6 apart is the overall package and quality, and of course, the convenience. We live in a world where convenience rules. Convenience is the number one most important thing to the consumer, to the user, above all else. Quality actually does not matter nearly as much as convenience. That's why we are dominated by algorithmic feeds. Everything you watch, everything you consume, everything you put into your brain is not something that you actively search for. It's something that is algorithmically driven to you because it is convenient. It also has the enough quality to keep you coming back to those feeds because you care about the content being delivered to a degree. But the number one factor is still the convenience. It's still the convenience. Street Fighter 6 nails the convenience. I boot up the game. There are active players at every time of day. I queue for a ranked match. It works. It gives me a ranked match. I get to play someone right away, and the net play experience is frictionless. It just works. On top of that, you have all the other modes for people who are not necessarily as concerned about playing in a more like competitive environment like ranked. You have World Tour for casual players that can boot up and play World Tour right away. You also have the social features with Battle Hub. You just get into the game and you get to experience the game right away. And if you play ranked, dude, you get matches so quick and the action is so fast. It's addicting. It keeps you hooked. Even if the gameplay itself, oh my gosh, shit, I got throw looped again. I don't love that. But I love the fact that I can immediately queue up and get my run back right away, right? That is the number one factor that makes a fighting game sticky to the consumer. It makes the player base stay consistent. And when I look at City of the Wolves, I get the impression that I'm looking at a Discord fighter, which is somewhat of kind of a really negative thing to describe a fighting game. And I don't want to like knock, punch down here on Discord fighter communities. It is an amazing thing when people have a passion for a game in a community, even if it's smaller, and they self-organize and they go through all the effort, the trials and tribulations to keep their passion, keep their hobby alive, support the community. That is a great thing to do. However, you cannot expect the vast majority of consumers to operate that way. And the problem is, even if I'm willing to deal with the friction of the experience in a game like City of the Wolves, eventually, if enough people aren't as dedicated to me to queue up for games and to try to play them, eventually it's going to hit a tipping point where I can't find a game and I stop playing. That's just how it's going to work. The number one thing is not the gameplay. It is just not. The number one thing is making the product work well, making the package appealing, making it a valuable purchase for the consumer where they can get a lot of content out of it and have a reason to quickly boot up and keep playing the game. And when I look at City of the Wolves right now, when I look at this menu and think back to my experience in the ranked matches, I'm not getting that vibe currently. And it makes me worried. To be fair to City of the Wolves, SNK, and everybody, it is a beta. There is a chance that maybe the matchmaking will be much more populated and much more smooth in the full experience, that the slowdown between rounds won't be an issue, that there will be more quality connections. That is very true. That could be the reality, right? They might have time to fix it. Maybe there are some kinks in the system that can work out for the full release. But a lot of this is really making me think of another game. This whole experience is really making me think of another game I was excited to play, that I thought was really pretty, also had like really great graphics, great art style, badass soundtrack. It reminds me a lot of DNF Duel. DNF Duel, while gameplay wise I think City of the Wolves is way better, DNF Duel had a lot of problems even with the game. The gameplay of DNF Duel was busted. City of the Wolves, I think, gameplay-wise, seems like it has so much potential. I am interested in playing City of the Wolves. DNF Duel, the gameplay, it was like a bubblegum game to me. After a while, like, it lost its appeal, lost its flavor, and it was just too offensive and too easy to do bullshit offense and not enough defensive options, for sure. On top of that, there was just this friction when getting into the game. It was just, like, harder to find games, but even more so, I think DNF Duel was more frictionless to find games than City of the Wolves was. City of the Wolves felt harder to navigate than DNF Duel. And if that was a problem for DNF Duel in that state, and I feel like City of the Wolves was kind of worse, makes me worry. Now, I do think, once again, I think the gameplay is way better in City of the Wolves. This game was fun for 2 weeks, and I love DNF Duel had so much potential, and I was really disappointed that the game never evolved. I hope that they can turn this ship around. I really hope. Now, once again, it's a beta. I actually found this package where they're looking for a player questionnaire to submit your feedback for the beta. Maybe enough people can speak on this and share their feedback and mention things like matchmaking and the menu system and the slowness of the rounds, things of that nature. Maybe there's a chance this gets addressed. But given SNK's track record, I don't know. I don't have high confidence. And this is the problem. It's just embarrassing to be a fighting game player. I could not recommend this to another person. When I look at Street Fighter 6, I feel like we finally had a package where I could say, hey, normal person, if you spend $60 on this, you will be satisfied with your purchase. I can't do that without, you know, kind of be like, well, you know, it's the gameplay itself is really fun. The match, you know, there's some issues here and there, but if you get through the netcode, maybe if you find the right people to play with, maybe you go on Discord and message these people, you keep adding all these asterisks and all these exceptions, and it's like, dude, you should just be able to boot up the game. There's Marvel Rivals for fucking free. I can open Marvel Rivals right now and play as the Fantastic Four immediately for free. How am I going to tell somebody to spend money on a fighting game that doesn't work? It's embarrassing. This is shit that should have been solved in 2010, 2015. It's too late for that. It's too late for that. So I really hope they can address it. I would like to play this game more. I will probably play this game a bit more, but I do not foresee this becoming a successful fighting game unless they fix this. And Japanese devs who make great fighting games seem to not be able to make great gaming products. It's been a consistent pattern for way too long. I don't know what the hell happened with Capcom. They turned the ship around with Street Fighter 6, and that is the number one thing. I don't even think Street Fighter 6 gameplay-wise is like the god game. I don't. I think it's a really good game. But I think the main thing about it is that you can buy the game, you can play, and it has an active community. And that sets it apart from every other game on the market. Not really expecting much, but hoping for the best. I will be keeping an eye out on City of the Wolves. I will try it again. I will probably buy it myself, most likely. I do want to play it more, but I'm very skeptical about this. Very skeptical. Really hope they can turn it around. And that's all I got. Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves. I'm out.